Leading expect is a transitive verb including possibilities. John Kennedy warned that aerospace technology such as satellites, cell phones, for example, must be guided. In his words, because those technologies don't have a morality of their own. This happens to be extraordinarily true in the technology of mobile phones, smartphones, machine learning, social media. Is that not only do those technologies not have a soul and not have a mind of their own, but don't have a morality of their own. Over this period of time, over the last 30 years or so, our colleges and universities lost the humanities, lost that perspective. My mother's father happened to have been a humanities professor, where that is the origin of this field, morality. Morality is a real thing. There is a real right and wrong. When life expectancy is declining, Americans, loyal Americans, need to drop everything and see what are the things that we're doing that's causing life expectancy to decline. Machine learning is one of the top ones. Machine learning that does not use human heuristics, attached to a medical sect, a qualifying medical sect, attached to a physician license. I know we can change this forever for the better. It takes a public relations risk off of the technology companies to say, look, we're offering a medical sect where our employees are self-selecting what their personal values are. Our organization is embracing medical science. We're embracing a peer review panel to take a look at Bing searches, Facebook searches that result in Americans going from 98.6 degrees down to 72 degrees. And what's the system that's causing that? And that's part of what we're talking about today. In Kent English is how we perfect the brand of American medicine by influencing positive change. Steve Jobs is an individual that isn't with us anymore. Steve Jobs is the person we didn't reach fast enough to free him of cancer. He envisioned a personalized brand of phone, iPod, internet in a single device. That was hailed by the market as category killing. The wrinkle with the smartphone, and Steve's not with us. We're not saying things to disparage him or his loved ones. Because bless you guys. But the smartphone is implicated in part of this decrease in life expectancy. It's something that we need to get U.S. governors ahead of. We need to get other technology companies in front of it. Because, we can do better, basically, with oath professionals. As quality as folks are at Apple, they don't take an oath. They don't take any kind of Hippocratic oath. They should. If you look at even the non-medical practice companies that have oath professionals, Medtronic is one you can point to, where they offer a medallion to their new employees as a standard, of living their mission every day. That's one of the reasons why you see Medtronic performing well compared to its peers. That's why you see Medtronic performing well. It's oathed professionals, it's medallioned professionals. We can help implement that program at Google, at Yahoo, at Bing, at Facebook, at Apple. We know that perfecting the brand of American medicine can be central in that. The book is on sale at my website, profi.me. We want you to join us. Like we said with the Volkswagen in Chapter 3, machines have no values. The quality improvement system alternatives, out of the walkie-talkie company, Motorola doesn't have any values of its own. Motorola famously fell behind Apple in market share. The process improvement philosophy of Motorola failed to see, the emergence of the smartphone, failed to see it timely, failed to anticipate it promptly, and fell behind. That quality improvement methodology is basically debunked. There were other methods that were here. They were more successful. I'll shamelessly say, my grandfather Frank Bertulis's 1957 American LaFrance fire truck gave the 911 program a team to call and a truck that could get there to put out fires in America. That's the kind of quality improvement we're looking for in firefighting. And there's a whole nother system, theory, energy in my leading expect system that is the marathon of efforts in increasing life expectancy in everything you do every day. And so we're asking for your help. We're asking for you to join us. The walkie-talkie company, happened to be the hands of United States Marine Corps, and owes its goodwill to the United States Marine Corps. The United States Marines were great before the walkie-talkie, not because of the walkie-talkie. Motorola had untold goodwill originating from the walkie-talkie, and yet is one of the origins of that company. Here at Kent English, as part of our medical sect, we recognize that the Regenton had options, that the Dutch Merchant Marines had options of staying with Holland or joining the United States. We love the Regenton that joined the United States. We have another name for them. They're called the United States Marine Corps. We're not interested in Motorola free riding on the goodwill of the United States Marines. We're not going to tolerate it. Patients don't select a physician or pay $1 more for their physician because of the walkie-talkie guys at Motorola. It's not something that patients care about, and it's not something that improves quality. And so, let's do lead and expect. Motorola successfully implemented only 3 of my 7 topologies. We're hardly interested in sharing, the 7 topologies with Motorola. They're part of the problem because they've been saying that they're putting walkie-talkies in the hands of United States Marines somehow can be translated into better financial results or better quality results, and it doesn't and didn't. The United States Marines, were ferocious battle winners before Motorola, long before 1773. Again, they're part of the American movement. You can't have them. Six Sigma originated in 1986 with the mother company Motorola. American manufacturing long predated Six Sigma. If anything, American industrial dominance waned amid Six Sigma. If you looked at, any point in time, take, 1986 from now. In the last 37 years, has American manufacturing performed better, or did it perform better in the years before that? It'd be hard to say that Motorola intervened in superior manufacturing results. We think that America was manufacturing in the 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, and arguably was most dominant at the beginning of the 50s, with the Marshall Plan. And the politics on that just happen to be so fascinating that I'll bite, because we know that at America's Revolution that we had Lithuanians, Germans, French, and Russians that were all on the same side, and that was critical in overturning the Dutch, overturning the British. It happens to be essential because today you have this issue in Russia where you have a class of oligarchs, 7 or 8, depending how you measure it, and their oligarchy is predicated on the loans for shares program, which Boris Yeltsin authorized in the 1990s, which basically, if you got invited to a meeting by Boris Yeltsin, in the 1990s, he might have issued you shares in Russian state assets in exchange for taking loans from Russian state banks, and that's where the Russian oligarchs came from. That's not capitalism. That's not what the East Germans were doing. That's not what the East Germans left the USSR to join. That's not what the Polish left the USSR to join. The loan lease program needs a total rebuckling, a total re-review, re-accreditation. I've offered to help look at those transactions. Where I know that I have ancestors that were Russians that came to the American Revolution, fought on the American side. They're Lithuanian. And as we say to my American, he's not Russian. He's Lithuanian. Like for the Hunt for Red October. But we know that accrediting the Loans for Shares program is one of the highest return activities for nation building in Russia. I know that my ancestors were knights in Russia because the Russians in the revolution killed off all of their Cossacks in a genocide that history has largely forgotten. Those of us that have ancestors that were above that system, that happen to be Americans, are available to help review the Loans for Shares program and the apprehension about the Marshall Plan that goes back to Joseph Stalin, which is an unfortunate part of history because during World War II, America and Russia were famously successful as allies. Were back-to-back World War champions. And during the war, there was a program called Lend-Lease. And the Lend-Lease program was one of the most important cooperative programs where American tanks were leased to the USSR, where it had a socialist government and had a socialism and restricting what kinds of business it would do with other countries, which is unfortunate. But that tactical error after World War II in Joseph Stalin not accepting Marshall Plan money, because Americans were ready to reinvest in Russia. Like we looked at Germany, we looked at France, we looked at Russia, we looked at Poland and those other Baltic countries and said we'd love for you to join the free world. We'd love for you to join the free market. And the coincidence that Joseph Stalin looked at the Lend-Lease program and said, yes, we will lease American assets under a Lend-Lease program, but he looked at the Marshall Plan and said no, is one of the biggest diplomatic errors in history, that American administration was not in front of Russian premiers the whole time saying, what we'd like to do is invest in infrastructure, and institutions, through this Marshall Plan. And, the success story of Western Europe ties back to, French and Germans saying, yes, we'd love to get redeveloped. And, the Russia unfortunately saying no, and then saying no on behalf of some portion of Europe from Eastern Germany to the east, which is a bummer. But the Yeltsin program, after the Cold War was lost, and we had a real regime change through most of Eastern Europe, including in Russia, but not all the right people won and not all the right people lost. You had these 7 oligarchs that took the Loans for Shares program, which is cynical. It's not rooted in any authority of any kind. It isn't what Joseph Stalin was reacting against. It wasn't what Nikita Khrushchev was reacting against. It wasn't what Brezhnev was reacting against. It wasn't what Gorbachev had promised the Russian people and the rest of the world in Perestroika and Glasnost. And so why is it important? Is that nation building in Russia is a very real political topic that traces back to the unfortunate choice of Joseph Stalin to not accept Marshall Plan money, which I know that Americans fundamentally are interested in redeveloping Russia. Um, that American policymakers are fundamentally interested in redeveloping, the Russian industries and engaging in trade with the West. Russia was a global power that was like 10% of the global economy and is now 1.7% of the global economy. And, Russia fell behind countries like India and China. Um, Russia's been caught sleeping on the global market. And the decision by one or more of the Russian oligarchs to engage in this ridiculous expedition in the Ukraine is a completely unacceptable use of Russian resources. And there are multiple means by which it can be reeled in. The Ukraine, already had its own country. They already had independence. And the people, everyday people in Russia, are good people and don't want, their sons and daughters going off to the Ukraine to invade a poorer people. And so, why is that important? The Loans for Shares program is the policy that Yeltsin put into place that was the origin of the small number of Russian oligarchs that we list. There's Americans that are descended of the White Russians that were there before the communist revolution, killed off 500,000 Cossacks in a genocide that the media didn't cover then and hasn't covered now. We fundamentally think that the Cossacks and the other knights that helped rule Russia did a better job before 1905 than what has been reported by the Socialist Party afterwards. There were Cossacks and higher that built the College of Mines in St. Petersburg. I know that my ancestor was involved in designing the College of Mines in St. Petersburg. It happens to be Vladimir Putin's alma mater. Must have done something right. The White Russians probably did something right. The Cossacks and higher and knights and order of chivalry did better, in the 18th century than was described by V.I. Lenin. And so why is that important? Perfecting the brand American medicine is a movement here in America and abroad. The central issue in Russia is a health issue, where the International Criminal Court indicted Vladimir Putin for separating Ukrainian children from their parents. Something that we offered to help reunite those children with their families, using physicians as the go-between, because it's a very straightforward public health issue. Something that almost no American media company or technology company reported on responsibly. We didn't get any coverage for it, despite the fact that our method's been used for vaccine recalls for youth, for adolescents. It's a proven method of just risk stratifying. It's common sense and straightforward. And that perfecting the brand American medicine is about improving life expectancy in America through this movement of leading expect and also being a responsible role model for the rest of the world. Something that we were doing before machine learning, before our tech companies, before that walkie-talkie company started saying that they had some quality improvement methodology. That with all their foresight didn't see the smartphone coming. Classical civilizations did elective surgeries. The ancient Greeks were doing many elective surgeries that we're familiar with today. Not all their medical techniques survived. Certain changes and erosions in civilization, in chivalry. The aqueducts collapsed. An incredible amount of knowledge was lost. Subsequent movements in things like Holy Roman empires, Holy Roman republics, tried to trace back to the neoclassical movement That movement is still alive and well today in places like Mount Pleasant, Iowa, where Lincoln's hometown thinks that Iowa Wesleyan University is a university owned by us, by Midwesterners, by descendants of the Spalding family, who are were descendant of Dr. Martha Berry Spalding. She's like one of America's first female physicians. She lived from 1836 to 1900. She used to pick up Abraham Lincoln and burp him during the Civil War and reassure him. And that's critical that Iowa Wesleyan University, not become some, federal resource, some federal asset. It's not something the federal government knows how to run. It's an affront to our values as Americans and those that fought on the side of the Union. Frank Petoulas was a quality inspector at the Elmira Fire Engine Factory. That factory in Elmira, New York, traced back to 1832. They were putting out horse and buggy fire engines. They go back to the 1830s in carriages, and then they had coal-fired, steam-fired, and then ultimately the phrase fire engine, which traces back to this company. And ultimately, combustion engines that you see in museums, of which I've had the opportunity to go and look at the American LaFrances in museums. They happen to be handsome, cherry red, gorgeous, museum pieces, which is nice. That issue of that particular company trying to manage finance and quality separately led to it not becoming publicly traded. That's one of the unfortunate parts of our system, is that the right companies haven't succeeded. American LaFrance happens to not be in business anymore, but did bring us the key innovations of the modern fire truck. Didn't defend the intellectual property of Frank Petoulas, which is completely unacceptable. If you think about what a mobile lab that a fire truck is, and the undertaking of repeatedly building thousands of that and exporting them all over the world and to every state in America, it's too bad that it was undermanaged. And yet the reason happens to not trace back to failures in science, but in failures of, finance. Who's in charge? How are those resources used? What sort of things are centralized from decentralized? If he made a nickel on like each fire, that was put out on a fee schedule, the same way that paramedics have, because ambulances are billable services. For whatever reason, fire has not. That would have been one of the most successful automotive companies. It could have potentially been like the fourth automotive company out of our big three, because the sheer volume of fire trucks that were manufactured, and manufactured so well that you didn't have to buy another one. And so, in Leading Expect, we look to, the opportunity for excellence in American manufacturing. We've looked at a business plan that's in Frank Petoulas' tradition of reintroducing some of the Leading Expect methodologies into automotive manufacture. It happens to make a lot of sense. It happens to be something that we're interested in working with United States governors on, because we know that automotive manufacturing happens to stimulate the local economy. We know that a small number of Leading Expect principles introduced into new manufacturing plants would be hugely successful. And we're happy to share those ideas with United States governors on those ideas, including the outlay of a port assembly system, where Leading Expect has a principle of port assembly that'll be remarkably successful in manufacturing, and that happens to be my father's vocation, my grandfather's vocation. It falls under the editorial category of avenging my grandfather's career, but something that I'm passionate about because Leading Expect is a methodology that'll teach manufacturing and help make American manufacturing great again. We had the Iron Age here. America had the Iron Age and led the Iron Age. It's not always understood by elected officials that tradition of the Iron Age originated from a finite number of shepherd tribes. There were Lithuanian tribes that had an Iron Age tradition. There were Kent English tribes that had a tradition from an island nation. There were Atlantis American traditions of the Iron Age, like Greek city-states, like neoclassical style, and there were Jotun Olympic Iron Age traditions of how to manage the different castes of individuals and also the heroic effort of the individual, where there are multiple Olympic events that trace back to Iron Age work that falls under the category of I'll show you what I can do. How far can you throw this shot? Which is the classy way of not shooting cannons at each other. Six Sigma didn't invent American manufacturing. It traces back to these 66 to 103 shepherd traditions, and that's been the key area of study that I've engaged in my career, is going back to the origin of those Iron Ages, which happens to be important across the American economy. It also impacts medicine, where American medicine is, in the Iron Age and higher, and it's something that we're very serious about continuing. Leading Expect includes how we care for our caregivers. There's a medical science of long robe entericology, of which there are short robe entericologists, basically, that are involved in how you provide for a safe, hygienic, antiseptic care environment, surgical environment on down, including physicians' homes. And there's certain foodborne diseases that are epidemic even in our caregivers, that the tradition, the ancient shepherd traditions in those 66 to 103 tribes happen to be really important for trying to defeat foodborne illness, because the rates of foodborne illness are huge. The origin of those is from the food supply. The impact of that is unmeasurable, and does not have a long robe science or a medical specialty really dedicated to it. That body of logic and wisdom is something that we've tried to incorporate into our Manner One program, which is implementing those private health, public health norms into the residential setting for physicians, for professionals, of which there are old shepherd traditions that include common sense things like taking your shoes off when you go into somebody's home. The transfer of disease is far under-described and far under-managed in practice. And for those that are very serious about the process of eliminating surgical infections and hospital infections, the tracing of many of those parasites go back to us and back to our foods. It's something that we can do better as a species, as Americans, as U.S. governors, um, to join the long robe profession of providing a sterile environment for surgery, providing a sterile environment for hospital care, and that includes a Manor One program, which is how we care for our homes, how we develop our homes. That specialty of architecture is another field that is entirely absent in natural law. For those of us that aren't familiar with the architecture field, many would look and presume naively that an architect is trained in public health, is trained in medical science, is trained in calculus, and they're not. One of the most stunning things about our organization of professionals is that we have, and I mean it in the nicest way, art student architects determining public health norms in what our buildings are designed as, which is wholly unacceptable as part of this Hippocratic movement. And so adding a layer of real accreditation on the design and building of America's infrastructure and buildings is central to this leading Expect movement. Because people expect us to eradicate disease. That's what they expect of American policymakers. We were on a tear doing that, up until, like 2007, like 2014. If you look at Jonas Salk and Louis Pasteur, we had a lot of momentum. And there's good folks out there in the marketplace that have really been trying to do that. And, with foodborne illness, if anything, we've gone the wrong direction. It happens to be one of those fields that adds complexity to existing diseases. And it's something that's solvable through design. And we've added a system in our Manor One program, which is our residential design toolkit that includes provisions for sanitizing surfaces. And nothing is more important in residential design and non-residential design than the implementation of these best practices, of which there were traditions in our other shepherd tribes, for example, of brass doorknobs that were of a very specific brass alloy that were believed to kill microorganisms, something that architects are wholly unaware of, and there's no training program for that. That's part of what we're a part of at the Sir Henry Vaughan College of Knights, is to implement those 103 shepherd traditions of public health into the design of our homes, of our infrastructure, of our places, and make for an expanding life expectancy for every last child of every American. And that's some of the work that we describe here in the book 2 of Perfecting the Brand American Medicine. Like Six Sigma without some distress recognition program. And distress recognition is one of those functions that was at the physician's elbow with their staff before we took their resources away. Commits the Robert McNamara fallacy of measuring success on the body count and not leading indicators such as the science and the brand of American medicine. We have a heuristic for recognizing distress in patients that we use. We have a whole system for how distress recognition is used in service recovery. The service recovery program in medicine is one of the simple best investments of your philanthropic dollar, of your federal dollar, of your state budget, and of your medical practices budget. We talked about a program, a Leading Expect program that we've used that's resulted in dramatic drops in malpractice risk to physicians. installing a magistrate judge in the old Kent English tradition of having rapid adjudication of patient complaints is one of the best methods, and is a area that the Cerny College of Knights is committed, that we're willing to help train folks on being those magistrate judges. We know that having prompt service recovery is hugely successful in patients getting more of what they need, patients getting what they want. If you're talking about the Medici Latin tradition, the Epicurean tradition, the Florentine Italian tradition of giving patients what they want, which can be part of the American system. It's one of our medical sects. There's the Atlantis American, which is the utopian, let's increase life expectancy and give people the care that they need rather than just the care that they want. There's the Kent English. There's a tradition of natural law that has the ability to care for working folks. It has that tradition. And then you have the Jack Vatic, the Jotine Olympic tradition of providing, for the care of human ability, including what you'd call like superhuman ability, like Olympic ability, sincerely Olympic, like actual Olympic. And we know that change is central to how we re-gear and retailor our culture around social trust. And we know that we can do these things at technology companies. We can do them in medical practices. We can do them in governor's offices, in implementing a Kent English magistrate judge so that a patient gets a prompt answer. There's a system for a prompt answer. We know that you can take every dollar that's spent in the malpractice system and spend it better in a magistrate judge. That's what we intend to do at the Cerny College of Knights, as part of Kent English, is give working physicians being rewarded with a magistrate judge being appointed. That's something that we talk about in other videos as part of perfecting the brand of American medicine. Basically, the malpractice system is too slow and isn't rooted in medical science and not rooted in natural law. And, there isn't any evidence that malpractice torts improve medicine. The counterexample is Mike Cerisi, which we talked about. Six Sigma presupposes that particularly top-level management must be passionate about Six Sigma. And, this is the idea of like a in-company champion. Leading Expect doesn't have to be passionate. You can, because medical science is worth being passionate about. The sober business of extending life expectancy happens to be a calling. It's an empirical science. It's a repeatable method. It has very clear options for policymakers. We think that we don't need to have like brand champions, but we recognize that corporate executives that embrace the Leading Expect movement are they're going to be rewarded. Shareholders will reward them. It includes financial returns. Organizations that are oathed in our medical sects have better financial returns. If you look at benchmark peers, outperformed Motorola. If you look at Apple stock compared to Motorola, Motorola going back to 1986, way underperforms Apple. Where Apple had a mission and vision, they fell short of an oath, which is a bummer because a smartphone was worthy of oathing its people. If you look at General Electric versus 3M, 3M stock outperforms General Electric. That happens to be important because the company that was making the Post-it notes, that was behind the process improvement method, ended up gaining more in stock value than General Electric. Where they were, laying off America's manufacturing core in a futile claim of trying to create being the top in each industry. And by collapsing America's manufacturing base in a cynical conglomeration rather than giving shareholders what they want. There's shareholders that want pure hydroelectric um, exposure in a stock. They want an option for that. They want pure airline engine stock. They want to be able to have a secure marketplace where they can choose between the two options and not have it rounded off between two separate companies that do two totally separate things. But at the time, people thought General Electric was walking on water. And if you look at the returns to shareholders, it didn't pan out. The guys that were making the post-it notes that General Electric was writing on ended up getting the return on investment. Mostly, I want to convince you that focusing on medical science and just concrete natural law will do better. So, alternatives to lead and expect repeat many of the mistakes that mankind made in the 18th century. They focus on process thinking. When Leonard Euler published his work on topology in the 18th century on the seven bridges of Königsberg. The 18th century, called it wants you to embrace its mathematics. There are reversible bridges. Those reversible bridges are called topologies. There are cycles that are repeatable. Those cycles are qualitatively different than one-directional process. The non-leading expect methods have not distinguished between one-directional process, repeatable cycles from the old Greek kailos, and topologies. And that's part of what we're evangelizing today, at Kent English. The alternatives to leading expect are neo-Malthusian ideas of scarcity limits, that somehow we're going to run out of healthcare, we're going to run out, and there's an abundance of resources on this earth. There's an abundance of energy possibilities. There's an abundance of service possibilities. There's an abundance of different ways of living. There were 66 to 103 other shepherd tribes that had other appeals to natural law. And some of those ideas were lost. As you go back in time, they were lost at different rates for different reasons, but they can be refound. Some of these other quality methodologies other than leading expect, because again, leading expect is medical science, that allocates time, and the sacrifice of physicians and medical scientists in the cost of medicine, and the other professions, the other quality professions, fundamentally don't allocate physician training as a opportunity cost. If you look at some of the quality management companies, even out of Harvard, that are scoring the quality statistics and the total cost of care statistics of what does it cost to do a hip replacement, they fail to allocate the years in medical training, the residency, the fellowship, the tuition of medical school. Those sure feel like costs. They happen to be incredibly important parts of the cost equation because physicians have not been recommending medicine to their children the way that they did a generation ago. And largely that the field has been way overmanaged by non-physicians, and that's a wrong that can be righted. Those other quality management methodologies are authoritarian, centralized, a tendency towards centralizing, a tendency towards federalizing things that can be done at the state level, of centralizing to a corporate entity, things that can be done locally at the physician's elbow. Those other quality improvement methods were silent on the historical problem of the internationalization of opium, that originates, and now everybody knows this, but the opioid trade in America traces back to the Dutch East India Company, having imported it here. Um, like Kent English, we're a part of this movement that we fundamentally believe that we won the American Revolution. That included defeating the Dutch. That included defeating the Dutch West India Company, who had a base in Albany. There's some people that pay taxes in New York State that think they still do pay, like a tax payment to something like the West India Company, because that's what it feels like for taxpayers in New York. We empathize with that, as hyperbole. And there's those of us that believe that the Dutch East India Company was also thrown down. The Dutch holdings, you know, like west of the Pacific Ocean, and that happens to be one of the origins of the opioid problem. That in the guidelines from the Institute of Medicine here in America, and the Joint Commission that mandated pain screenings in the community, which we discussed earlier, and we're not going to fall for it again. We know that the Joint Commission can get totally decertified, and we can start over. And so, we welcome U.S. governors, corporate executives, inclusive of technology companies, physicians, hospital executives, to join us in learning some of those 18th century lessons, and instead choosing lead and expect, choosing a tradition of quality improvement, as we elaborate on in Book 2 of Perfecting the Brand of American Medicine. These are the ideas that were involved in doubling life expectancy here in America up until 2014, when we saw the number waning. And so that concludes our summary of lead and expect. We look for your help. For those of you that were inspired today, we want you to join our movement. We want you to join Lead and Expect. You can reach us at profi.me. We're also enrolling students at the Sir Vaughan College of Knights. We have a seminary right next door to the studio that was an old professional finishing school right here in West Lebanon, New Hampshire, where we intend to graduate our Knights. You can imagine yourself walking across the stage, pulling a sword out of a block of ice, and being oathed as one of our College of Knights. As a part of the Kent English tradition. We know the Kent English tradition traces back to Henry II, Henry III, Sir Henry Vaughan, who's effectively Henry X. Were the King Henrys were the oathing professionals. America is worthy of oathed professionals. We've done oathing in physicians. We know that, in this new 21st century, in business, in medicine, in law, including technology law, that our people are worthy of oath professionals, are worthy of connecting those oaths back to the old traditions, back to the old tribes. And that's a lot of what we're trying to promote here at Kent English. That in our 10 STEM program, we challenge folks with the engineering at search engine companies to help us get the word out in news, help us get the word out in search fields, help us get the word out in viewership, help us get the word out in likes and followers. Our observation is that organizations without editorial standards have been, getting hundreds of thousands of engagements and tens of thousands of followers, despite not having any journalistic standards, not having any editorial standards, much less peer review. And again, we're fundamentally a science-based, peer review-based entity. In the Kent English style, you'll see that we're true believers in Atlantis American, the neoclassical movement of extending life expectancy. And we didn't say on camera everything that can help increase life expectancy, but we were very candid about some. And we talked about different ways that the magistrate judge program can be implemented in every state in America and every physician group in America to help stem the tide of malpractice costs in America, which we think is just such an important priority because making physicians afraid doesn't solve the problem of improving medical science, doesn't change the medical law, it doesn't change natural law. And we talked a little bit about how a Kent English, medical search engine can be a companion to each of the search engine companies, each of the social media companies, in providing straight English search terms for straight English results. That's something that we've been involved in doing all over America. We happen to bump up against you guys' algorithms, and we're on the side of angels. I know that our work is rooted in medical science. We welcome to engage and present to you folks any day, every day. We'll clear our schedule for it. There's nothing more important than perfecting the brand of American medicine. And as we said, we have a countdown, 224 days to the New Hampshire primary. We're right here in New Hampshire in the studio. We've invited United States governors that were on our list that performed well in life expectancy to come join us. To be interviewed and also to run for office. We extend that invitation to those that want to enroll their employees in Lead and Expect as well. We know that New Hampshire is a real important part of the American political phenomenon, and we think that having folks that really get it, really want to change it, are invited to come and be a part of our First in the Nation countdown movement. And so, again, we thank you for your time and thank you for your engagement. Please share this video with those that you love and those that you care for, in the medical profession, those that are in U.S. state governance, those in federal governance, and those that, with our, search engine technology companies. And have a marvelous day.